Hey OP7s! So the Expanse Osiris Reborn drops its closed beta today, but I got an early look at it and I'm very excited to share my experience with y'all. After doing 3 playthroughs of the second mission in the game, I can safely say that this felt like Mass Effect in the Expanse universe, which I definitely don't say lightly. As my regular P7s know, I've spent years picking apart how Mass Effect wrote its companions, its story structure, and even why its player choice is so good. So when I say Osiris Reborn absolutely feels like Mass Effect in certain ways, that comes from a place of careful analysis and love for the entire Mass Effect series. The hub of Pinkwater 4, the cover system in combat, the squad commands, the world building, it's literally all like Mass Effect, and it's all incredibly deliberate. During an exclusive Ask Me Anything I attended, one of the devs said their goal was Mass Effect in space with romance, fully voiced AAA 3D. And honestly, that's exactly what this delivers. But there is one huge caveat with the cutscenes that felt a little off at times, which as a huge Mass Effect fan caught me way off guard. We'll get to what exactly felt off about it in a bit though, because I first want to chat about what blew me away with this Mass Effect inspired game. Huge thank you to Alcat Games for providing me with beta access. It was awesome seeing this early. And obviously, major spoilers for the beta and Osiris Reborn will follow. So when I started the beta, I first chose my main character's preset background and class. As of right now, the protagonist doesn't have a set name, but I have seen them referred to as the Captain, so I'll go with that here. In the presets, you can choose between a female belter that has a class of either an officer or a hacker, or you can play as a male Earther captain with a class of officer or hacker as well. In the actual game, we'll be able to customize our protagonist similar to Shepard, but there's 4 presets for the captain in the beta. In this playthrough, I chose a female belter hacker, but I have played the belter officer as well. Compared to Mass Effect, I'd say backgrounds and class choice have significant impacts on gameplay, even just visually. When I met Zafar for the first time as a belter, I was significantly taller than him, which is very true to belter heights in the Expanse books. Your chosen class also impacts the skills you're better at during skill checks, with my choice of hacker being better at the engineering skill check. And the devs have mentioned that origins will affect the story missions you'll see, along with how characters interact with you. Even though my origin didn't significantly impact the beta mission itself, I'd say that it still met my expectations with how it'll affect things moving forward. Alright, so with all that aside, now it's time for the really good stuff. Companion interactiveness. To me, characters are the heart of what makes Mass Effect so good, and it comes as no surprise that Osiris Reborn also focused a lot on character work. The one thing that immediately stood out to me was how good the companion interactiveness was during this second mission. I could be walking around the station, and the captain's twin Jay would speak up during certain moments without any input from me. She'd randomly leave my side, showing she had autonomy, which really made her feel more real. And just as a quick aside, our twin named Jay is with us from the start of the game and matches our chosen gender, so my twin in the beta is also female. We're both contracted mercenaries, and this station here, Pinkwater 4, is our home hub. The best companion interactive moments besides Jay's though, were when I could ask a companion who wasn't in my party to blow up certain areas of the environment using the Gemini's gun. Zafar, who's the Gemini's engineer, wasn't actually on the ground with me, but he was very much a part of this mission, especially during combat. The devs have also said that this type of companion interactiveness is baked into most story missions, so no one gets left behind, which is really cool. And just as a quick aside, if you're noticing frame drops during this footage here, I tried a few fixes on my end and nothing really seemed to work. A few other content creators also mentioned dropped frames during their playthroughs, so there might be some optimization issues with Osiris Reborn, at least with the beta. Anyway though, back to the companion interactiveness. We could even chat with Zafar during the mission, which felt similar to the main missions of Mass Effect 2 when contacting Joker and EDI. Also, during cutscenes, Jay was very active, often speaking more than the captain, which fit her personality really well, so I have a lot of hope for how good the other characters will feel during dialogue-heavy moments of the game. I really enjoyed one moment in particular between the captain and Jay later on in the beta, which hammered home the stakes of what was happening and how aligned the two of them were on what to do next. All that being said though, the major caveat I have with the beta is tied to the companions during cutscenes, but I'll leave that discussion point for later on. Overall though, I'd say Osiris Reborn exceeded my expectations with companion interactiveness, and this was also only the second mission of the game, so who knows how good it is after this. And just for context, compared to Mass Effect 3, I'd say the level of interactiveness definitely exceeded early missions like Earth and Mars. Also, just really quickly, there weren't any opportunities for romance interactions, but again, that's because it was the second mission in the game. The devs have mentioned that when the romances do become a thing, it's going to be very character-driven instead of through mechanical gift-giving systems. Also, I'm sure you've been able to tell for yourselves, but this game is incredibly stunning. The game models for the companions honestly blew me away with the level of detail during cutscenes. And I'll get to the environment and immersion later on, but as an Expanse fan, it was honestly surreal being able to walk around Pinkwater 4 and even hear about Holden during a newscast. Certain Belter movements were even used by NPCs in conversations, which had me smiling the entire time. And there was also a themed Misko and Morisco mug, so plenty of Easter eggs are littered throughout the beta alone. Back to the visuals though, the only thing that caught me a bit off guard were some of the animation work during cutscenes, especially facially. At times it felt a bit mechanical, which did break my immersion, but animation stuff is usually cleaned up last, so I'd love to see where this is at closer to release. There were plenty of repetitive animations just like Mass Effect though, so I'd say the visuals overall exceeded my expectations, and the animations just barely met them. Back to the companions though, they were actually the most involved during another Mass Effect-esque game mechanic, choice and consequence. During a moment in Hard Vacuum, Jay and I were stuck, unable to move forward without getting caught by the Protogen baddies. And we had two ways to move forward during the mission. Either wait for Zafar to distract the ship above to reach the farthest airlock, or to simply go through the nearby airlock as Jay suggested. In my first playthrough, I actually went through the nearby airlock, and Zafar directly asked why I didn't wait for him. It really made Zafar feel real by asking that of me, and the devs have said certain choices like this can cause companions to hold grudges against us. So yeah, needless to say, on my second playthrough, I did listen to him and went through the farthest airlock, which actually changed the mission's pathing. The far airlock's pathing was very straightforward, with movement through the station, and there was even extra loot. But when I didn't listen to Zafar, it was way more complicated, and I actually had to outmaneuver some damaging pressurized air. So if this trend continues past the beta, I would expect that listening to your companions actually benefits you more through extra loot and skipping over mechanics that would take you more time. In terms of seeing those differences between two different playthroughs, and especially as early as the second mission, it was honestly really impressive. Besides that choice though, there was also a second story decision that was tied to a skill check. Skill checks were way more prominent in Mass Effect 1 with things like the decryption skill and such, which is actually very prominent in Osiris Reborn too. But for now, we'll focus on only the persuasion skill check, which is most similar to the Paragon or Renegade dialogue checks from the trilogy. In the beta, I could choose to either persuade our boss to have the other Pinkwater mercenaries fight with us, or to have them stand down. When making this persuasion skill check, or any skill check really, you actually won't be able to see if it'll work before choosing it, which I found pretty interesting. Luckily though, my captain's persuasion was good enough for convincing the boss, and as a result, some extra Pinkwater mercs helped me in the first combat section. On a different playthrough, when I didn't choose that option though, those mercs weren't there, and Zafar also had different dialogue in the next scene, which was cool to see. It was pretty short-term consequences, but for only the second mission, I was very happy to see the level of choice I had on the story. And in terms of dialogue choices, there was usually a Paragon-like option and a Renegade-like option for replying, so I felt pretty solid about the options available. It was occasionally unclear which options would move you forward in the conversation, but from what I could tell, anything on the right would move the scene forward, just like in Mass Effect. So once again, for the choices and consequences, my expectations were exceeded by what I saw, since it really felt like my choices impacted what the characters were going through. And most importantly, it added a lot of realism to the world and companions. And just for context, the level of choice and consequence in this sequence felt similar to the best of the Leviathan DLC in Mass Effect 3. Being able to make different choices and have the characters around you judge you for those choices was very much like Mass Effect, which made me feel very satisfied. And speaking of being satisfied, the combat in this Osiris Reborn beta had me grinning and terrified the entire time. As I'm sure you've seen here, the combat is super high action, and in this playthrough, I actually was playing on hard mode, which caused me to die quite a lot. On normal mode, it was a lot more forgiving though, but hard mode basically required cover at all times. As someone who's played Insanity for every Mass Effect Trilogy game, it definitely felt similar to that level. I also used both a mouse and keyboard and controller during the beta, and each option felt very intuitive to what Mass Effect keybound. As to the weapon options, I appreciated that any style worked for each unique encounter. I went with the shotgun, SMG, or pistol for up-close combat like in Mass Effect, and an assault rifle for enemies farther away. During all my playthroughs, the best combat moments for me was ordering Jay to destroy the environment, which was similar to ordering Mass Effect companions to explode canisters and such. And there was also a tactical pause option that the devs added specifically for Mass Effect veterans, which was super helpful when things got a little bit hectic. It basically slowed time down to 10%, and from there, I could make tactical decisions and give commands to other companions too. Usually, you will be out there with 2 companions just like in Mass Effect, but for the beta, I only had Jay with me on the ground. And in terms of Jay's abilities, I really liked her precision with a wrist cannon, and it honestly felt essential to command her often in hard mode, at least for me. There was a good variety of enemies as well, with some sniper enemies, shielded ones, and mini-boss style ones like Banshees in Mass Effect 3. The biggest difference between Mass Effect and Osiris Reborn, though, are the abilities the captain and our companions have. Instead of having biotic ones or something like Incinerate, you can equip different gadgets that help you out tactically. I found the hacker's gadgets to be less helpful than the officer's ones, but I prefer a hard-hitting build in general. With the officer class, I defaulted to the wrist cannon gadget to overpower enemies, but with the hacker, the preset gadgets included shocking enemies or tactically seeing where they were located. In terms of how the gadgets themselves work, I'll save that for a separate video or post, just because I want to wait for any beta changes the devs might introduce. Regardless though, it was honestly way funner being the officer class, which would be the equivalent to the soldier class in Mass Effect, so that's my personal recommendation for anyone wanting more of an overpowering build during combat. In terms of ranking the combat, I'd say it was just as immersive as Mass Effect, and it felt like I really had to be strategic about my playstyle, otherwise I'd die. And one thing I really liked about combat was that when I died, if Jay was still up, she could save me, which was a nice touch. So overall, I'd say combat exceeded my expectations as well, and for comparison, matched the level of Mass Effect 3's combat, at least on hard mode. And one of the reasons it definitely exceeded my expectations was tied to the crazy cool experience of combat in space. I honestly wasn't sure what to expect with the hard vacuum sequences, but I was blown away by how good this one was. From the get-go, the sounds and danger level felt higher, and it was really thrilling with how different the experience felt from being indoors.
Good one. One, eagle eye. Sights on that one.
The music's a bit louder, all the audio coming through is comms only, and there's stuff flying around everywhere. It's just something really surreal that was completely unique from Mass Effect, and it was by far my favorite part of the beta. Honestly though, maybe it's not very surprising, because the Owlcat team did hire devs from Cyberpunk and Halo specifically for cinematic moments like this, and clearly, it's paying off. As a quick aside, if anyone is interested in experiencing the beta for themselves, you can do so by purchasing the Collector's Edition or Miller's Pack on the Osiris Reborn website. I'll I'll include a link to that in the description. Back to the beta, something that I'd also never experienced before was performing a spacewalk with the slick magnetic boots on. Big warning for anyone who gets motion sick with things like this, and even though I myself also got a little sick, it felt like an experience you'd actually have in space walking around on an outer hull. Not even just during that sequence though, it was really impressive seeing the captain run through 0G and the sounds they used to capture that. So overall, this sequence way exceeded my expectations. It was all completely unique to anything I've experienced before, and was definitely better than the mini spacewalk Shepard performed in Mass Effect 3. And something that also felt unique from most Mass Effect games was the skill check system. So as I went over before, the skill checks require a set amount of skill points that you won't actually know before you select an option. So what this means is that you'll either have to rely on your companion skills just like in Mass Effect 1, or beef up your own skill points before selecting those options. If no one in your party can make the check though, you could use a focus drug to increase your skill by 1. However, I believe this doesn't apply to dialogue choices. Under the skill trees menu, leveling the exploration skills like persuasion and cyber sabotage for the hacker class is really straightforward with no skill trees at all. And gaining XP, from what I could tell, was also through performing skill checks. So that's not the most complicated part of the game. The combat skill trees are way more complicated though, which I might include in that separate video or post if y'all are interested. Also, I'll leave out the weapons upgrading system and gadgets upgrading systems for now, because that might also change after the beta has concluded. Back to the skill checks though, I found that the engineering checks were the funnest, because it was way more interactive than the straight persuasion ones. You had to follow wires, which were very similar to Mass Effect 3's Citadel DLC, and in Andromeda when using SAM. I also enjoyed how linear exploration was in this mission, where any additional exploring basically led to more materials and gadgets. You could probably ignore a ton of exploration on a normal mode playthrough, but it might become more essential on hard mode for upgrades and such. So I'd say for the skill checks and exploration, it definitely met my expectations, and in some cases, like with engineering checks, it was slightly above average. Alright, so that's everything that either exceeded or met my expectations. Now it's time for the big caveat I mentioned at the beginning, which was honestly the weirdest experience I've seen. So in certain cutscenes, the dialogue just made no sense. It felt like certain lines were very forced, and the logic of the scene was really off, for lack of a better phrase. For example, the opening lines between Zafar and the twins made very little sense logically as the scene went along. Zafar would kind of launch into poetry without it making sense for him to do so at that point in the conversation. So yeah, I was very confused at first, especially because Owlcat is known for their writing. The thought had crossed my mind about it potentially being written by AI, but the Owlcat Games PR rep has said no Gen AI was used during the writing, and no AI voices either. So I don't really know what to make of certain moments of cutscene dialogue, other than to say it really broke my immersion, and it significantly missed my expectations knowing how good Owlcat usually writes. One thing a dev mentioned was that adding in the voice acting is only happening fairly recently in Osiris Reborn's development, so it could be that certain lines looked better on paper than actually being voiced. But as a Mass Effect fan who also loves the trilogy's level of writing, I'd say the cutscenes were below that level about 30% of the time. It wasn't every scene that was lacking solid writing, but when it was off, it felt really off. Also, something that caught me off guard was how the twins referred to the main Osiris Reborn leader as the Brute. As a clear black woman, that felt pretty culturally insensitive, so my expectations have significantly lowered for the writing in general. As to why the cutscene writing is worse than I thought though, when I went through the beta multiple times, it felt like world building or character building was pushed more during those scenes. So sometimes characters would say something that didn't feel relevant to them at that moment, however, it was relevant for what the players needed to feel about them. For example, sometimes an NPC would explain their backstory, and it would feel forced for it to be there during that moment. I think this was done to make us more attached to them before events to come, but it landed in an awkward manner most times. The writing through the data pads, ambient dialogue, and between the companions was very on point though, which only made it more confusing why certain cutscenes felt so flat. So yeah, out of the beta, I'd say dialogue between the captain and their companions is probably what I need to see next, especially during cutscenes. And as someone who values character interactions above anything else, I'd say I need to see more of that before release to be confident about where this game will land for me. The biggest question I know some of y'all have though is whether this game is the next Mass Effect like so many outlets have been claiming. In terms of what I've seen and heard, the Alcat team has said they're watching both Exodus and Mass Effect 5 very closely, which is a huge positive to hear, especially with added features like the tactical pause specifically for Mass Effect veterans. With that being said though, it doesn't feel like it can replace the next Mass Effect with what I've seen so far. Obviously, there aren't any aliens, there aren't crazy physics-breaking mechanics like Element Zero, and there's no biotics or gigantic AI robots out to kill everyone. It's very much a game grounded in a hard sci-fi universe, which brings with it its own unique world building, characters, and vibe. It clearly knows where its strengths lie with the hard vacuum combat, and even the roll of the dice skill checks. But even though it feels like Mass Effect, it is very much not a replacement for the Mass Effect universe, and definitely not for Mass Effect 5, at least for me. If anything, Exodus has the best chance at being that type of replacement. But honestly, from what I've seen, I'd say that the Exodus universe is also completely different from what Mass Effect brings to the table. Regardless though, I hope y'all enjoyed this sneak peek of the Expanse Osiris Reborn's beta. I'll definitely make more of these videos as more information is released, so subscribe to catch those updates. Otherwise, you can watch this video next to see which Mass Effect mysteries are already being answered in the Mass Effect 5 teases. See you there.
Logging you out, P7.